It's day one of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's landmark visit to the United States. Air India One touchdown at the St. Andrews base in Maryland early this morning. He was welcomed by senior officials of the Biden administration and also India's envoy to the United States, Taranjit Singh Sandhu. In today's itinerary, Prime Minister Modi will be holding a crucial bilateral talks with US Vice President Kamala Harris. That's at 12:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Before that, Prime Minister Modi will be meeting top 5 CEOs in Washington, including the Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon, Adobe Chairman Shantanu Narayan, First Solar CEO Mark Widmer, General Atomics CEO Vivek Lal and Blackstone CEO Steven Schwarzman. The Prime Minister's one-on-one meeting with the CEOs is expected to begin at 7:30 p.m. Again, that's Indian Standard Time. It will in all likelihood last an hour each. After that, the Prime Minister will be holding bilateral talks with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison at 11 p.m. tonight.
Prime Minister's visit to United States has 6 elements, 6 broad elements. So first is, of course, the bilateral meeting with President Biden. Second is the meeting with the Vice President Kamala Harris. Third is the Quad Summit. Fourth is the interactions with Prime Ministers of Australia and Prime Minister of Japan separately. Then there is an interaction with select industry leaders, and finally there is the UN section.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in the United States of America after 6 months of hiatus. A massive security presence outside his hotel, that's Hotel Willard, which is where he stays normally. This time around also, he's staying at this historic hotel, and there is absolute security presence and barricading of the hotel. If you see on the right and the left-hand side, there are these cement huge block barricades to ensure that no cars really pass through this entire lane, this entire road outside of Hotel Willard. There are trucks that are parked right through the lane that touches the hotel to ensure that no cars are parked and to ensure that security is absolutely 100% foolproof. On the other side as well, you can see security presence, vehicles and barricading. So no entry into or outside of Hotel Willard unless and until they're checked by security personnel. He's not the only high delegation level official or a leader who's arrived at in the United States of America. We have the Prime Minister of Australia and the Prime Minister of Japan both here in the US, and there are going to be bilateral meetings that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold with all his counterparts, including a bilateral meeting with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. There's also an important engagement when it comes to the business community. He's going to meet top business honchos of the country to speak of post-COVID recovery, economic recovery when it comes to India and the United States of America, and how can the two countries move forward. Quad in-person meeting is a very important aspect of his visit, not just to see how to counter China and China's aggressive posturing in the Indo-Pacific, but also to ensure that there's resilient supply chains, and India is key to that entire global supply chain. After which he is going to address the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Video journalist Yogendra Singh in Washington DC, Geeta Mohan for India Today.
The Prime Minister also had a message for the Indian diaspora. He also received a very warm welcome when he touched down in the United States as a group of Indian Americans gathered there at the Joint Base Andrews Airport soon after his arrival in Washington, D.C. They all were cheering as he stepped out of his motorcade. He also briefly interacted with the Indians who were waiting at the airport despite rains. He was seen interacting with them, shaking their hands, some of them also indulging in selfies. They had gathered outside the Willard International Community where Prime Minister Modi is staying. Soon after this, Prime Minister Modi took to Twitter to commend the Indian diaspora for distinguishing itself across the world, saying that they were the nation's strength. One of the signature events of the Prime Minister's overseas visits has always been his meetings with the diaspora community in large gatherings. due to the current COVID situation. However, you're not going to see that happen this time. The Prime Minister is unlikely to have any large gathering or meeting with the diaspora. It will be limited to these small interactions. Importantly, the first ever in-person Quad Summit is all set to take place in the White House on Friday. Ahead of the crucial Quad Summit, Prime Minister Modi will be holding standalone bilateral meetings with the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and US President Joe Biden. The agenda of the meeting will be to counter China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Beijing's military presence, political influence in the Indo-Pacific region pose a major threat to not just India but also to Japan, Australia and the United States. Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Quad leaders is being seen as a move towards tackling China's aggression and a commitment to a free and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. The Quad group is an informal strategic dialogue with 4 members, as I mentioned, India, Japan, Australia and the United States.
This is where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold bilateral meeting with President Biden, followed by the big Quad meeting, the first in-person meeting of Quad leadership that will take place at the White House. Primarily, the focus is going to be how to ensure that China and Chinese aggression is contained in the entire Indo-Pacific region. There are many areas that will be covered when it comes to alliances, but also the focus will remain counter-terrorism, post-COVID recovery is also supply chain resilience. These are very important aspects, but terrorism and the situation in Afghanistan certainly are going to be key. President Biden has been criticized for having withdrawn troops very hastily from Afghanistan and the focus now shifting to another theater, that's the Indo-Pacific. But the fact of the matter is that for India, for Australia, for Japan, for many other countries, security situation in Afghanistan is a huge concern. There is the white flag that flutters in every building, atop every building in Afghanistan, but there are certain people over here who still are keeping the tricolor of Afghanistan flying high. That's the Afghan flag. This is a tenement that was that first started as a protest site to protest nuclear war or nuclear arms race. That was in 1978 and it became a permanent structure in 1981. Is that a message that you still want and people over here still want an inclusive Afghanistan?
I don't want that with you being next door to Pakistan and Afghanistan only being one more nation away. I don't want that to influence a nation of 1.4 billion people on this planet.
Well, that's a citizen of America, a concerned citizen, saying that India, being next door neighbor, should not be influenced by what Pakistan is doing. Speaking of Pakistan, will certainly come up when Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets the leaders of Quad, as also President Biden. Video journalist Yogendra Singh in Washington, D.C., right outside White House, Geeta Mohan for India Today.